Hello, I'm Kevin Turner from Real Estate Talk, and good to be with you. My next guest is Nadia Hana. And Nadia started investing at the tender age of 18. She's just completed a small development and has a current portfolio worth in excess of $2 million. Nadia, thank you for your time.
No problem. Thanks, Kevin.
Let's talk about the start. What prompted you to get into property at 18?
So I've been lucky enough to come from a family of keen investors. Both my mother and father have been investing in property, both in Australia and the UK of over 15 years. And from a young age, around about 15, I can remember getting my first property book. So all those many books that keen investors would look at. So you have Steve Zadel's and Margaret Lomas and alike. I'd start to get those for Christmas and birthdays as a gift from my parents. So I'd find myself in my casual time having a read through those, and it was definitely something from a young age that I was interested in getting into and following in my folks' footsteps.
So you didn't have a chance to do anything other than property, really, by the sounds of it.
Well, they encouraged me from a young age to whether it was going to be studies through university or getting into a full-time job. Essentially, they encouraged me to look at property investing as a first avenue. So from a young age, I started saving up as much pennies as I could, essentially, to get into the investment market as soon as possible.
Now, your first property, I understand, was in Linwood. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. Yep.
Why did you choose that, and how much of an influence did your parents have in helping you choose that?
Yeah. So at the time, age of 18, many of my friends were buying brand new cars and going on gap years, and I was doing something different, looking into getting into a significant amount of debt. Essentially, my father had been studying a couple of areas south of Perth, but within a close proximity to the business district. So essentially, he had influenced me in looking into Linwood and trying to obtain a property where, he always said value is in the land. So trying to get a large property with a potential to subdivide. So he definitely did influence me in looking towards that property. And when I did, there was a lot of discussions, obviously, because it's a significant commitment at that age. And I was banking approximately 70% of my wage for around about 4 to 5 years. So it was a big step to take that commitment.
That is, I think there's a great lesson there for anyone wanting to get started too, and that is to take a bit of pain up front. You mentioned there about how your friends were out probably partying and buying cars and things, and you've really got to be focused on doing that, don't you?
Yeah, that's it. And I mean, there's points where you ultimately need to decide what's important, and there were sacrifices along the way in getting to where I am today, where I've had to make tough decisions. But essentially, I think it's all worth it in the long run. And the earlier you can start this journey, the more beneficial it'll be in the long run.
Apart from making those sacrifices, Nadia, what were some of the other lessons you learned from that first purchase?
Yep. So that first purchase, I mean, initially it was 1,138 square meters. It was essentially zoned R30, R17.5, so it had a potential there to subdivide. At the time, I took it on for a couple of years just to rent that property because, looking at, well, I had no idea how to subdivide, let alone even heading towards that way. So I set myself a goal to start researching as much as I could around what it would take to subdivide. Getting to where I am now and having just about completed the development, it's only within days where there'll be handover. Essentially, there's been lots of challenges along the way, and probably the biggest lessons learned that I've had has been a couple of things. One is definitely always allow yourself an additional buffer, whether it's 20 to 30% additional funds. You just can't underestimate potential unexpected circumstances, and I had a couple that definitely made a big impact to me and slowed down the process. So it's something that I'll continue moving forward. Definitely allow yourself that extra buffer of funds. Probably another one would be ask as much questions as possible. I think I've got quite an inquiring personality, but essentially with all those SMEs and professionals that you pull in, I think no question is a stupid question. So try and ask as many questions as you can and pull as much information as possible, because even though I did plenty of research, I got caught out a couple of times where I thought, gee, that's a good lesson learned. So there's plenty that I've collated to date.
Well, you've given us some great tips there, but just in closing out, what other advice would you have for anyone, a young person wanting to get into property?
Yeah, I think probably the biggest thing is many of us are encouraged to buy your first property, and that would be one you live in, grow old in that property and pay it off over the years. But I think if you're considering, I obviously had the great support from my family, but if you're considering and looking into property investing, I don't think that it's anything that you can't achieve. Don't be held back by whether it's your wage. At anything, the most important tool that you can have is asking the questions, and there's a lot of information out there. Perhaps I think there's an opportunity to have more support for young investors, but where you can, try and pull in as many mentors or support as possible so you can go in the right direction.
Yeah. And there's some lessons for everyone in what you just said then too. What's next for you, Nadia? More development?
Well, I set myself a goal when I was 19. It was 5 by the time I was 25. And although some thought it was a bit, it stirred up a few laughs, essentially. Got there in the end. I haven't set a goal for 30 as yet, but would like to continue looking at development. My partner and I are looking at a couple of things at the moment, and hopefully down the track I'd like to work with some young investors and look at some career opportunities.
Yeah, wonderful talking to you, Nadia. All the best for the future, and thank you very much for your time.
Not a problem. Thanks very much, Kevin.